Coming up on tonight's episode of Faith versus Culture, where should churches draw the line in obeying the government? We explore that and more coming up next.
Having sex before you're married is a bad idea.
Don't tell me there's no such thing as gun violence.
That just depends on your definition of when life begins.
There are problems of sin and habit that cannot be solved outside the person of our Lord Jesus Christ.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Faith versus Culture right here on the CBN News Channel. My name is Dan Andros. I am the managing editor at Faithwire.com. I'm joined as always by author, Pastor Dale Partridge. Dale, what's up?
Hey, brother, we got a pretty big issue going on here in the church-government divide as we're starting to see more churches wanting to reopen their doors, and the government's not real interested in doing that because, as I mentioned in my article I wrote about a month ago now, that churches happen to be the epitome of what we've been told to stay away from, right? Handshakes, hugs, close quarters, lots of people, all in a small group, children's ministry, daycare, like that whole world. You know, churches kind of really create this environment that for the last several weeks, months now, we've been told to avoid. And I know churches are trying to figure out, how do we do this? How do we open up safely, but open up, right? Because we are seeing pastors recognize that there's, they can't neglect the physical gathering of the flock much longer without actually injuring the spiritual souls of the sheep. And I think that's what's happening with these pastors is, they're realizing that the online digital church experience isn't sufficient. It's a bridge. It's been a great bridge for many churches to bridge this gap, but it's not the solution. We know that the church is an interpersonal relationships. I guess it's a body, right? It's built on the interpersonal relationships of the body, and they're thriving together. So lots of things are coming to a head, and that's what I think we need to talk about today. Where's the line? What should pastors be thinking? How should Christians be looking at this? And I'm talking too much, but go for it.
Yeah, no, it's a great point because I've seen both sides in my circles and friends on social media. Obviously a lot of them Christians. And so I've seen both sides of it. Some saying, don't be reckless, don't get out there, don't rush it back. But then there's other ones just kind of, jabbing at this idea that we're just listening to the government as they shut us all down. And we're just, turning the other cheek and just taking it. And it's like, clearly there are times where, because you can point to, Romans 13, submitting to the authorities, and that's fine under most circumstances, but there are clearly times where we are not to obey, governments that have gone off the rails, because the assumption in Romans 13, of course, is a government that's following godly principles and trying to enact God's law. So, of justice. So when you have a government that eventually that at some point crosses the line, it becomes your it becomes your duty really to stand up against it. Like for example, slavery. It's, we wouldn't just sit there and go, it's just submit to the authorities. Same thing with abortion. We wouldn't just go, just submit to the authorities. You fight against those things.
I actually want to share something about that real quick, Dan, is that, I'm looking up a tweet here. Ben Shapiro said, and I really appreciated this perspective. He says, how about we all make a deal? No downplaying the COVID-19 death and hospitalization counts, and no downplaying the dire economic and liberty costs of lockdown. Fair? The idea is saying like, hey, yeah, there's two sides, and let's not throw one out while we focus on the other. The reality is, in this church discussion, is that we do have a new disease that is killing immune-compromised and elderly individuals, and it's new territory. That is here. It is something that we should have a fear of and have some wise and discerning counsel about. And then at the same time, we have the First Amendment, which is critical to our religious freedoms in this country, and they are being infringed upon right now with these, governors locking down no church gatherings.
Yeah.
And, so there's both sides, and we got to figure out how do we run down the middle.
Yeah. And again, I keep pointing out that it just seems very odd that somehow churches are like the one thing being targeted, that make that like it's the example somehow. And I'm not sure who's to blame for that, but it seems like churches are the ones that get singled out for this. Like, don't you, we have these rules, and don't you meet at your church? Like, what? Why are churches getting thrown out there in the middle? And so that's interesting to me, number one. Number two, Dale, I wanted to bring up this story that we covered on CBN. Not asking for permission. Hundreds of California churches are planning to open on May 31st, regardless of what the government says. So this is 500 California pastors preparing to open their doors on Sunday, May 31st. Churches are not asking for permission, said Bob Tyler, a religious freedom attorney, advising the pastors. He said the governor is sitting here as a dictator, trumping the Constitution, and is kind of hanging on to this state emergency for as long as he can. He said, we'll give the governor an opportunity to amend his order. If he doesn't, these pastors have told me that they're committed to opening regardless of what the governor decides. And it does seem like at some point we have to be able to say, you can get back out there and, of course, be safe. Don't sit there and, be high-fiving everybody and doing all those things, but you can get out there and just kind of keep your distance. I feel like people have gotten good enough at that at this point in time now. Every time I go to the store, everyone's got their mask on. People are good about trying to keep their space and keep apart from you. So it seems like there's no reason that we should be at this point just shutting down everything. I live in Pennsylvania, and the governor just extended our stay-at-home order in my particular county till June 4th. So we're in a red zone. They've got a color code. Do they have a color code in your state, Dale, by the way? Do you know?
All I know, we don't have a color code that I know of, but all I do know is that we've extended our state of emergency, which doesn't necessarily mean our stay-at-home order, but our state of emergency till July 6th here. And so there's and we're in Oregon, and so we're a pretty liberal state up here. But we do have, we live out in the country, and our city, Bend, Oregon, is actually, pretty free. Most of the restaurants are starting to open up, and people are gathering together, and people are out hiking and doing things like that. So it's pretty lax over here. But I think that what we're going to see, Dan, is, we need to see churches, meeting in the middle again, coming up with some sort of plan. I'd like to see the churches do this, not the state do this, right?
Yeah.
So the churches come up with the plan of, this is what we're going to do, not because we have to, but because we want to. And that's the difference between a government taking control of the church and the church is going, no, we love people. We want to do what's right. And we want to honor people's concerns and be compassionate. So we're going to do X, Y, and Z. But we are seeing these come to a head where the government's saying one thing and, the churches are saying another, and we're coming a clash on the First Amendment, which is a big deal.
Yeah, and we'll cover more of this on the other side of the break here, Dale. But we got some quotes from Russell Moore, spoke to CBN earlier, just a few days ago here, and interesting comments there as well. But I do think common sense needs to win the day. We're going to break this down more, where that should land and what it could possibly look like on the other side of the break. This is Faith versus Culture. Back in a second.
On the home front, Thanks for joining us for CBN's On the Home Front, where we highlight what the men and women of America's military do to defend our country. CBN honors the men and women in our military with an initiative called Helping the Home Front. It partners with churches across the country to meet the needs of their military families, from repairing homes to wiping out medical bills for wounded veterans.
On the Home Front, Tuesday morning at 10:30.
If you want to be an attorney with a passion for serving people and for excellence, Regent University needs to be high on your list.
Regent's award-winning law school doesn't just create lawyers. We create leaders, judges, prosecutors and defense lawyers, civil litigators, and leaders in government.
My focus has been trying to really make sure we have the future leaders we need for the bench and the bar and for society generally.
You'll learn from highly credentialed leaders who are current and former judges, distinguished scholars, and ACLJ counsel.
I'm so glad I chose Regent. The relationships here have been amazing. The faculty have been amazing. Not everybody's called to the same thing when they leave law school, but they're called by a God who has a purpose for their lives, and He is going to use that education to make a difference in the world.
Regent will prepare you to be a purpose-driven, practice-ready lawyer. To start your rewarding law career, complete the online application, submit your transcripts, and take the law school admissions test by July. Apply today.
Okay, welcome back to this episode of Faith versus Culture. Dan Andros here, Dale Partridge there. A lot to talk about. If you want to email us, by the way, contact@faithwire.com. That's how you can get a hold of us. Ask us any questions. We'll read them. Suggestions, compliments. You can always send those. Those are great. You can yell at us too. We'll read those too. It's fine. We can handle it all. But contact@faithwire.com is where you can send all that. Dale, where else do you want to go with this debate? Because I think this is only going to heat up because some of the governors, as I said, Pennsylvania here, extending to June. You've got the emergency order out there in your neck of the woods till July. How much more of this can people take, and where should we look to be heading here in the next coming weeks and months?
I mean, I know there's pastors in Illinois. There's a tweet out by a guy named Cisco Cotto, who is a pastor, I believe, out there, a theological guy out there. And he wrote yesterday, breaking, Governor Pritzker, who is the governor of Illinois, confirms churches will not be allowed to have services with more than 50 people until there's a vaccine or a highly effective treatment or elimination of any new cases over a sustained period of time. And so I think that, again, this bar getting pushed out, it's like the frog in the kettle kind of thing, right? You're like, hey, I can do the warm pot here for a little bit. This is okay. And all of a sudden you realize I'm being cooked. And so this is, I think, what's happening. My experience says with government and politicians, we can learn actually what is going to happen likely with the Second Amendment based off of what has happened historically with the First Amendment. Let me give you an example here. The First Amendment, or the Second Amendment, is our right to bear arms. And we've seen over time that right be infringed upon. Now, slowly, right? So it's like, hey, no, we're not taking away your right to bear arms. You just can't have this gun, that clip, 10 rounds of this, and it depends on what state you live in. But it's a pulling away slowly, right, of what you can do. It's putting restrictions upon that freedom. You can have a shotgun at your house for protection, and or you can have a hunting rifle, and that kind of how maybe Canada is, right? Yeah. The Second Amendment, the First Amendment, I think will be maybe similar. This is a prediction of, hey, you know what? No, you can still gather at church. You just can't do it if it's more than 50 people. You have to have everybody that comes be registered so we know who came. And you have to do a CDC level or CDC grade cleaning between every service, right? I can see this kind of stuff coming. Now, I could be completely wrong, but I do think that is something that could happen. That's why, again, I don't think that it should be the state dictating to the church how to do and handle the church services. I think the church needs to be able to come up on its own. Now, this is also revealing, I'm a house church planter. And I have, that's what we do. We plant house churches. You know that if you listen to this show. And so I'm kind of already away from this connected to the government type church expression. But we do have a problem here, is that these nonprofit 501c3 businesses are receiving tax-exempt status from the United States. And because of that, the government does have a bit of a hold on them. And so we do have to look at the bigger picture of going, wow, maybe we should just drop the 501c3 status as churches so that we can be out from under the thumb of the government. Because that has been a huge threat historically. You guys have seen this, Dan, over there.
Yeah.
Lots of people, constantly politicians saying, if you don't do X, we will take away your status, right? That happens often. And so this is kind of a revealing moment of going, well, you know, I get both sides in terms of the government saying, well, we give you these status, you got to abide by our laws if you're going to meet as a church in a gathering that gets this status. And then you have the churches going, well, we have the First Amendment right, you can't do that. So there's a mixed bag here that we do have to have some really good, wise, discerning thinking around before we make some decisions.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the keys, Dale, is that we should have these conversations, and we should have our church leaders and these First Amendment attorneys, some of the ones, especially the ones that focus on religious liberty issues, they hopefully, and we can encourage them, and really, honestly, a lot of times it takes us speaking out. As much as people don't want to admit this, if you speak out, the squeaky wheel gets the oil, it gets the grease. So you got to speak out, you got to make the noise, and you got to say, hey, who's watching out for this? Because otherwise they're just not going to say anything and you're going to get ramrodded. So we need to be speaking out and having this conversation because we'll land at the right spot. The problem is if it's a one-sided conversation, you're just going to get run right over. Because again, I've said this before and I'll say it again, I believe politicians a lot of times, and it's not a nefarious thing, but it's just a human nature, their self-preservation is first, meaning they're going to do things that if they know the masses are frustrated about something, they're going to react to that. They're going to try to take care of that. But my fear is that not enough people are speaking out, and we're just there's such uncharted territories with a pandemic like this and like this nature that we're just taking everything. We're like, yeah, let's just be obedient and let's do it, So me personally, I just think it's time that we have this conversation because I believe we will land at the right spot if the right people and us are just speaking out and putting the pressure on.
Well, and I want to say something before we close into the next segment here, is that, you know what, the political landscape can look bleak, but the spiritual landscape is magnificent. The Lord is doing something really beautiful here. And if churches are forced to innovate into new gathering structures, smaller structures, more agile, flexible structures, maybe gathering in homes, the way that they do in a majority of countries that have persecution or issues like this. We got to remember the Lord's doing something here, and He could be actually trying to diversify or going to diversify the body into more, into more homes and smaller gatherings and buildings for a time that's to come that may be more politically hostile to churches. And so, just don't just say, I just want it to be how it was, right? That takes God out of the calculations, and it takes the potential future out of the calculation, is that there could be things coming in the future that the Lord is actually moving His flock into other places to find safety for a time to come. And so we just have to have a bigger dimension and zoom out a bit and go, okay, do I really want to fight for my Sunday coffee shop, campus, church situation? That's what we're fighting for. We want to get back to normal. I'm okay, actually, personally, with some change and some shifts. We do want to fight for our right to gather. That's the core issue. The Constitution gives us our right to gather. It doesn't necessarily give us our right to gather the way that we have in buildings of thousands of people on these big campuses. And so we got to look at these within the law, within the scriptures, and make some wise decisions about it. So it is complex, as I said earlier. Lots to pray about, lots to think about, and lots to discuss.
All right, we will do that when we come back on the other side of the break. This is Faith versus Culture. This is the CBN News Channel. Back in a sec.
If you want to be an attorney with a passion for serving people and for excellence, Regent University needs to be high on your list.
Regent's award-winning law school doesn't just create lawyers. We create leaders, judges, prosecutors and defense lawyers, civil litigators, and leaders in government. Ready to become a purpose-driven, practice-ready lawyer? To start your rewarding career, complete the online application, submit your transcripts, and take the law school admissions test by July.
Nutrition, exercise, essential oils, weight loss, and more. It's Healthy Living with Lori Johnson.
Talk about what's in this.
Join CBN health reporter Lori Johnson to get the latest information from today's top health experts.
This is fantastic.
Find out what you need to know to live a healthier life. Watch Healthy Living, Tuesday night at 9:30.
Woohoo! Hi, Superbook fans. Here's something else you'll love. It's the new Superbook Bible app. It's packed with games, activities, and Superbook episodes that you can watch for free. Oh no! There's trivia, a fun daily devotional, and answers to your Bible questions. Plus, an easy-to-understand Bible the whole family will enjoy. You can even create your own Superbook character. Ta-da! Whoa!
Millsburg Falls man coming.
Sorry, pardon me. Sorry, excuse me. Ouch!
Are you getting this?
Earn super points to win daily prizes too, and so much more. Time to get back to my adventures. See you soon. It's the new Superbook Bible app. Free downloads on iTunes, Google Play, and Amazon.
Welcome back to Faith versus Culture. Dan Andros here, Dale Partridge there. We were talking about when should the church stop obeying the government. A lot of people citing Romans 13 in the midst of obeying all these rules, but it seems to be a lot of extensions are happening now. And so it seems to be now more than ever a time of, hey, how long are we going to just endure this of them telling us we can't meet? So we've been having that discussion. Dale, where do you think we should be striking the balance between obeying the proper authorities and also standing up for our individual liberties as Christians?
All right, I'm going to try to get as much out in a little bit of time here. A few things is that, one, these are there's a difference between laws that are being passed and executive orders. I'm not saying that those need to be disobeyed. I'm just saying is that there is a distinction between like laws and state of emergency executive orders for a short period of time. But if those executive orders are leading to laws or buying time for laws, then we should be concerned. And so we got to remember that lots of people died for religious freedom, like gave their lives for it. And so this is a very touchy subject for anybody that's listening that's maybe not a Christian. You have to recognize that throughout history, people literally gave their lives for this freedom. So this is a big deal, and we're called to be very careful with that. The Bible talks about, in Romans 13, being subject to the governing authorities because every authority comes from God. And so we need to be very careful that we are obeying that rule. The only example that you actually see Christians disobeying the government is one, when it's the prevention of the church getting together, which is why you have underground churches in countries that it's illegal to gather as Christians, Iran, the Middle East, China, and that's why you have that. And there's nothing sinful about that. It's actually because we have to obey God, but not man. Now, those words that I just said are actually words from James and John. In the book of Acts, it talks about the Pharisees are telling them to stop preaching the gospel. And they said, well, we actually have to obey God, not man. So I think also the prevention of the gospel being preached is another area that Christians are called to obey God rather than the government. Outside of those two areas, the church gathering, and again, the church gathering is different than the church gathering at a megachurch campus that's supported by the tax exemption status of a government, the way that we've been gathering in the past. So there's differences there. But gathering and prevention of the gospel are the areas in my study that I've seen that Christians are free to stand up with the Lord versus in submission to the government on those matters. And that's the difference between church and state that we came here and founded this country upon. So lots of tricky stuff, especially, article came out yesterday, Gavin Newsom saying federal courts upholds California's ban on church services during pandemic. So this is causing a lot of discussion, and there is a very real issue going on. So let's just pray, all of us, for wisdom, for pastors out there that can basically pull into a Nehemiah situation where they have a shovel in one hand and a sword in the other. They need to build the solution that the Lord is leading them to and the scriptures call for, while at the same time fight for the religious freedom and liberty that we are promised in our Constitution and in the scriptures. And so let's just pray for wisdom for our governors, pray for the wisdom of the pastors, and that this can all be peaceful. That's our goal as Christians, is we're peacemakers. And so we don't want to start a fight that doesn't need to be a fight. We want to search out our hearts for peace. That's my closing thoughts, I think, on that, Dan.
All right, good stuff, Dale. Thanks as always. Thank you for watching. We'll be back to wrap it up. The other side of the break. This is Faith versus Culture. Back in a sec.
Introducing the CBN Bible from CBN.com. Now, an easier way to study the Bible and grow in your faith. Highlight your favorite verse. Read separate versions at a glance. Click and read a commentary. Or cross-reference your favorite verse using the Strong's Concordance. All the right tools to study the Bible, all in one place. The CBN Bible, available at cbn.com/Bible or the iTunes App Store.
This is CBN News Watch.
Thanks for joining us.
Watch breaking news, exclusive stories and programs, credible news reporting.
We show you what's happening in the world and how you can pray about it.
This is CBN News Watch, because truth matters. Weekdays at 5 on the CBN News Channel.
Yes, right on time.
From Superbook.
Pepper's Pizza Palace is donating pizza for everyone today.
Wait. I have big plans today.
Trust in God even when times are tough. He has a plan for your life.
Hey, we're gonna be late for the grand opening.
My parents want me to help with this outreach thing, feeding the community. What am I supposed to do here? Superbook!
Join the Superbook Club and get Superbook The Birth of Moses, plus 2 copies to share with others, all for your gift of only $25.
Pharaoh ordered all newborn Hebrew boys thrown into the Nile River, and I have a 3-month-old brother.
The Birth of Moses. Yours for a gift of only $25.
What will you do the next time the soldiers come? I do not know, but I trust God has a plan for all of us.
Superbook Club members, free streaming for seasons 1, 2, and 3 is now available.
That's all the time we have for this week's episode of Faith versus Culture. Thank you so much for watching and tuning in. We will see you next week. And until then, have a blessed week. We'll be praying for you. And we just are praying as well for our churches that they would have the wisdom to know when to stand and to when to yield. It's a big issue. I mean, this is our religious freedom that is at stake. So we'll be praying as we go forward this week, and we will see you next time on Faith versus Culture. God bless.